every day why other people in their life won't change, and why, no matter what they do, they can't change certain things. The answer is actually very simple. It's that there is some resistance to the change.
We're going to devote our energies to sports and gardening, all the cultural pursuits as far as they're concerned. In fact, we're going to put the Doones to sleep. Meanwhile, we dig.
Greetings and welcome to the Anadromous. This is Byrne Power coming to you from Tbilisi, Georgia, which is far beyond any place you're probably watching me from. Although, I don't know, you could be in Papua New Guinea and find this tremendously pedestrian. Well, I've been thinking about things, as I often do. And I decided one of the things that's been running through my mind has been the subject of change. And specifically, how is it that people change? How is it that groups of people change, that societies change? Is change good or bad? It can obviously be both, but why? What does it mean for us? And in a way, this sounds like a simple question. He changed because he got hit by the car, and after that, his life was different. She changed because, she met her boyfriend at the age of 15, and that didn't work out, and so after that, it sounds simple. And yet, I find it anything but simple, what changes. And we're living in a time right now of huge, huge changes. And we're not sure if those changes are for the better or for the worse. And sometimes they will be a bit of both. And how can we tell the difference? Well, obviously, I'm not going to answer all these questions. I'm just posing them. In a way, these are just preliminary thoughts I've been having. Stuff that's been running around in my mind. I just want to see if I can put them down somewhere that at least gets me thinking about them more. And if you want me to think about these more out loud with you, put your own comments down. And if you want more, let me know. In a way, this goes with the video I made earlier on desire and identity, because I think these things are all wrapped up. One of the things I've been thinking about is, how did our society change so much in the last 10 years? And yet, there was no simple moment when things changed. Of course, we come to this particular moment with the virus going around, and that's obviously changed a lot. But that's obvious. What's happening is the changes from the earlier last 10 years suddenly have coalesced into a certain kind of a thing now. And of course, they will keep mutating. What do we mean by change? What does that mean? Change is something that happens in time. It's something that happens as a result of time. If we were all just photographs sitting on a wall, or, nothing would change. We would just be these images, which is one of the reasons why looking at photographs is so interesting, particularly after a while. I've never understood people who take photographs of themselves or others, post them, and then never go back and look at them. For me, the value of photography, and this is what I learned, I spent about 10 years or so not taking photographs when I was younger. Because I'd taken photographs in my teen years and early 20s, then I stopped. And then in my early 30s, I looked back at those photos and said, oh my, that shows me a lot about the changes. And also puts into highlight what that period was versus what this period is whenever I was looking at them. And here's a big question. How can change be both good and bad? And sometimes in the same person with the same event. One event can spark good things and spark bad things as well. I think that is the human condition. And we always have to think about what's happening as a result of. Nothing just stays the same. Except God. Yeah, I'm a Christian, so I would think that. But as far as human life, as far as the world, as far as, plants and animals, as far as ecosystems, as far as technology, as far as society and politics and art and culture, nothing just stays the way it once was. Unfortunately, sometimes, because there were great moments. Wouldn't it be great if we just have a perpetual renaissance or a perpetual, scientific, early scientific period where we're looking at things without some of the drawbacks that also came with it. But unfortunately, that never happens. There's individual change or personal change. When you're looking at yourself or others, you can see change more clearly in other people than you can yourself, for the very fact that you don't really even understand yourself when you look at yourself in a mirror, which is what the Bible says, and it's proved to be remarkably true. You don't understand yourself when you look at yourself in photographs. But when you look at someone else, you can see them changing. In some cases, if they've had a traumatic event, yes. I have one friend back in Alaska who was unfortunately looking off to the road. She was actually looking for moose off in the river and didn't see the massive moose that came down off the side of the cliff. This steep section, because no one was expecting a moose to come off a steep section, and it ran right into the car and paralyzed her from the legs down. And oh my, that kind of thing brings changes. But most of the time we don't see it like that. Most of the time we see something, although there are moments in life, birth. When a woman gives birth, that's a before and after moment. And it's a before and after moment for the man as well, but not quite in the same way. There are moments. When I was younger, I lived on these Christian communes in the Jesus People days in the early 1970s. And eventually it was my turn to learn how to kill chickens, kill pigs, kill rabbits, so that we could eat them. Now, there's a lot of what I consider to be a lot of weenies running around today who, it's like, oh my God, did you kill animals? And if you're one of those people, I have nothing but sorrow for you, because you don't understand the nature of being a human being and the nature of food. And it's an act of sacrifice, really. And you have to enter into it. And I will tell you, there was a before and an after. And the first animal that I took into my, basically took its life and then later ate, was a chicken. And I was told by someone who was showing me how to do it, he says, after chickens, it's all downhill, because there isn't another animal that when you chop its head off, runs around, blood squirting out of it. We used to do things to tie, hold its feet, so, put it on a rope so it wouldn't. But if one got away and you start, we have the saying, like a chicken with its head cut off for a reason, and basically, although I've heard of other bizarre animal stories, I don't want to make this, it would be very interesting. I should do something on animals sometime, because I have a very unusual relationship to them. Having lived in Alaska, having lived with rats in New York City, having lived with farm animals, I think my relationship to animals is kind of specific. But still, why do we change? It's not clear. And two people can go through a relatively similar experience and change in two radically different ways. Why do others change to the point that we have trouble understanding them anymore? And sometimes this happens subtly in ways we don't understand. I've seen it happen with people, I consider myself not particularly extreme right or extreme left. And I've seen friends of mine moving in these different directions. And after a while, it's kind of like they're speaking a language or in a way which, it's like they've been reading too much of something. They've been doing too much of something. And they can no longer hold that conversation that holds tension in the middle, which is where I like to be. I like to be in that place where, we can talk about the extremes. But as soon as you are the extremes, I find the conversation gets really repetitious really quickly. And then there's this question. How much have I changed? How much have you changed? And why have you changed? Do you understand why you have changed? Do I understand why I have changed in different ways? That's a very important thing. Understanding why you changed is a key. And what do we do with personal changes that are bad or terrible or lies or tragic or horrific or permanent? What do you do with those kinds of changes? Things that you either have chosen or have happened to you, or, someone else is coming into your life, or some other situation, earthquake or a fire or something has come and changed everything. What do you do with those kinds of changes? These are all the things that kind of go through my mind. And I just wanted to think a little bit out loud about some of these things. This isn't going to be probably too long. I just wanted to put a few things on the table, see what I think, see if you have any ideas about how you see change, and go from there. So, let's talk about friends changing. I mentioned that a moment ago. You have probably had friends drift away, and then later discovered that they had changed drastically. And it's that time period. Here's one of the weird things I've noticed about friends in the late 20th century to early 21st century, and it's gotten worse, is that, see, in Georgia, where I'm living here, not the state of Georgia, but the country of Georgia, in Tbilisi here, when I talk about friends here, people tend to keep their friends all of their lives. They tend to have a friend group that they hang out with all of their lives. Now, obviously, not everybody does the same thing, but enough people do that it's like, I was talking with a man here who was in his 80s, and I was telling him, yes, I want to be a good friend. And he pulls out a set of keys out of his pocket. And he says, you see these keys? And I said, yeah. He goes like, these are the keys to my friend's house who's been my friend since I was a child. And if I feel a little tired and don't feel like going home, I can go over to his house right now, open the door with these keys, and go to sleep there and eat food out of his refrigerator. He says, that's my friend. And I'm like, I've considered myself in the past a good friend to people, but I realized this guy's on a totally different game than most people I know in the West. Why? Well, one of the strange things, I've had very good connections with people. I can think of 4, 5, 6, 7 people in my life that I've had very good connections with. And I would consider them very close friends. But there's always something in the way. And that something in the way is coming from outside of us. You know, maybe you meet this person in, I was living in New York City. Maybe I met someone there. Maybe someone came up and visited me in Alaska. Maybe I met them, when I was younger as part of the Jesus movement. Or maybe I met them when I was at L'Abri at some point. Different people at different points. But here's the problem. I don't think people know how to commit to each other anymore. So even people who are really good friends, well, the next thing you know is they've got to go to San Francisco to live because they've just gotten a job there. Or they need to move back home to Wisconsin. Or they need to, they're getting tired of New York City because it's just getting to them. Or they need to continue their university education in London or something. It's like there's always something driving people away. And so that friendship becomes something. Well, there's a very interesting thing. And this now we're talking more about groups of friends too. Bob Dylan wrote a song called Bob Dylan's Dream. It was on about his second or third album. And in the song, it's a great song sung to the tune of the old folk song Lord Franklin. And I highly recommend going and listening to it. The reason I didn't put it here is because I haven't got a doubt that the copyright police would be on me. And I'm not worried about that because they would put it in jail for 48 hours and then it would be released. But I just didn't want to take the time. But here are some of the lyrics, and you should go listen to it. Bob Dylan's Dream. It's all about friendship and losing friendship in a very interesting way. And he says, as easy as it was to tell black from white, it was all that easy to tell wrong from right. And our choices were few. He's talking about his friends when he was younger. And the thought never hit that the one road we traveled would ever shatter or split. And that's a very interesting thing. One of the fascinating things is that, you have something like Facebook, which has reconnected me with a lot of people from my past, people who had disappeared from my life, but Facebook reconnected them. In some ways, that was a very good thing. John and Jana, I'm looking at you if you ever hear this. Because it was people I needed to reconnect with in order to kind of settle a little something that may have had needed some settling, and those kind of things happen. But I also realized that many of those people, it's just like, okay, well, they're doing this. I'm just kind of peeking in, like through a peephole at their lives, just little glimpses, and I see bits and pieces. But one of the things I've realized is that it's like the breaking of the Fellowship of the Ring. Eventually, these roads shatter and split, as Dylan says. And I think part of the reason that nothing gets done anymore, that there, like you think about like the Inklings, C.S. Lewis, Tolkien, Owen Barfield, Charles Williams, those folks. Why is it they were so influential? Is because there was a locus of where they were. Oxford, meeting at the Byrne Baby Inn, and it's the Eagle and the Child, but they called it the Byrne Baby. And they met regularly. Who on earth meets regularly anymore? It's just, and I don't mean on Zoom. I mean in the flesh. And part of the reason I think that nothing gets done anymore is because we no longer know how to be committed. And I'm going off on friendship here, but it can also be seen in art movements and such. There aren't any decent art movements because everything is scattered. Everything is located in different places. And this thing, the internet, computers, smartphones, they don't bring us together. They allow us to remain independent and isolated, to use Owen Barfield's phrase. They keep us apart. Until people can learn the value of physical reality again in these things, nothing will change. But, I think about the friends that I've known and how we drifted apart. And it's really been a drift. Or you keep in touch for a while. I used to write letters back and forth to my friends, call them on the phone in the social media days. But I think the most dangerous period of all was the period, and I lost friends in this that I've never recovered from, was as the internet was coming in, but the old letter writing system was dying. There's this big hole in there, and a lot disappears at that point. So for a while, people are sending email to each other, but after a while, we don't know how to use the email. It's not the same as writing a letter. Well, with writing a letter, there's definitely codes, ways you do it. You don't write every day unless you're in love or something, but that's a different story. But what you do is you write. It takes a couple of weeks for the person to get it and to think about it, and then you start waiting for the letter to come back, and then you respond after a while. And some people will do it, in a couple of weeks. Other people will do it in a couple of months or half a year or whatever. And I like that rhythm. Email screwed that up because you could be on the email every day, but it wasn't like social media. Social media then really changes the game. You connect with people again, but now you're too connected. And also what's fascinating about that was to then drop, okay, so there's this gap period, and I've left, for instance, New York City and moved to Alaska. So there's a good, say, 1996 to, we'll say I really got more involved with social media around 2006. We'll say 10 years, just to give some time to it. And I'm looking back now and then there's other people that I'm catching up with that I haven't seen for longer than that. And I'm looking at their lives and I'm seeing how they've changed. And I'm saying, this person who seemed like such a, like a hardcore kind of garage punk, kind of almost scary, but a certain kind of very impressive. You look now and they're, and the images they're showing you are just so sad and trivial. And you realize, this is it? This is what they've got going on inside of them? Because that's what you're seeing, someone I hadn't seen since high school. I looked her up and she was just talking about her vacations in Belize. And I'm going like, it's just like, so that's, and I mean, that's it. It's like not much more. It's like, oh, this is it. I mean, yeah, you could probably argue there's something else going on with this person. Maybe they're private, but you're seeing what this person cares to show you. And you're realizing certain kinds of changes that have gone through. And you're asking yourself, how could this person, like this one person from high school, seem like someone who's very creative and intelligent, go to become this person who seems dull and lifeless? And how did that happen? That's where the mystery is, you see. How do people change? This is what's been kind of going through my head. How is it that, one person can enter a family, is put into a family situation and come out just normal, and another person come out just tragic and ruined, and be in the same family, you see? How does this happen? I mean, I'm thinking of someone else. I mean, I'm thinking of people who, it's like, you see them with possibilities as they're growing up when they're younger. And later you see they're just spending all their time basically geeking out about their favorite video games or fantasy world. And you're saying, you had potential. but now you're this. How did that happen? And I think about these things. Now, there's a lot of psychological stuff going on. But even knowing that doesn't help you understand the change. And it gets tougher when we talk about groups of people changing. Or, as we're seeing now, kind of a mass societal change. Here's a big question. And I think for anyone who is sensitive to history or psychology or politics, this is one of the biggest mysteries there is, certainly in the 20th century. How did Germany go from being the land of Bach and strudel and, a classic culture to Nazi Germany? And a lot of Americans will give the following answer. It's because they were Germans. Like, that answers the question. It doesn't answer the question. Because, and here's the thing Americans tend to forget. Germany was a much higher culture than we are currently. Or than we have probably ever been. That is to say, they had much higher, more refined ideals. And we're talking about, the general overall tenor of the culture. Now, one can point out things like, the rise of the higher critical understanding in the 19th century. You can talk about the rise of philosophical trends. And you can also look at this kind of proto-New Age movement that happened at the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, that included such things as, eating better and physical exercise and, nudism, naturism, and, all these things, all of which led eventually straight into Nazi Germany. And how did that happen? And a lot of people will say, well, they were just taken over by this gang of thugs. No, that won't do. I mean, when you see photographs of young girls, totally infatuated with the new ideals, it's anything but clear that these people feel taken over. Yes, of course, propaganda. But there's something deeper that's changed. And this also signals something very frightening. How does a society protect itself against such a takeover of the mentality of people? And that's what changed, is the mentality of people actually changed. Now, there is a transition period. There was the kind of romanticism was a big deal in Germany. There was, a whole period of in the 19th century where Germany, which was at that point a cluster of principalities and dukedoms, was uniting itself. It went through a period of struggle, but it also went through a period of aggrandizement of power so that they became stronger than the French and conquered the French in 1870 and starved Paris out, which eventually would lead to the French feeling really bitter, and that would help fuel World War I. Which then made the Germans feel real bitter, which would fuel World War II. These things just get crazy. But that's the complication. That's the mystery. How do groups change? And then, to further that mystery, how did they then change again after World War II? And I do know I have met more than one American or Brit who would say, nah, they never changed. But they hold the idea that the Germans were always, it's this idea that the reason the Germans fell to such an ideology was because they were always like that anyway. which, apart from being pretty much an ethno-racist idea, is essentially pushing away the truth. And the truth is, what do you think's happening to us right now? Particularly on the left. Not that there aren't reactions on the right. I mean, the media will tell you every last morsel of anything that happens on the right. Meanwhile, last year, cities were burning and people were marching around, and everything was just a protest, the occasional, mostly protest, mostly peaceful. And yet, things are changing radically. And it's happened in a very short period of time. And of course, I spent a long time dealing with this on the How We Got Here series. And what I'm interested right now in is not so much the how we got here stuff, but the mystery of the change that's occurring. And by mystery, I mean that it's not really explicable. I mean, when you just look at some of the things that have happened so fast, what's really strange to me is people who would have said one thing like 5 years ago. They would have said, of course, well, a woman is a woman, and then some people choose to think they in themselves, they identify with that. But they wouldn't have a problem saying a woman is a woman. Whereas now you actually have public figures talking about people who menstruate, who can't say the word woman because they're so afraid of offending people. How can you change so radically in so little time? And what's strange is we haven't got a figurehead like Adolf that's running the show. We haven't got a Joseph Stalin. We haven't got a Mao. We haven't got a Pol Pot. We've got, as I pointed out in my video on 21st century cargo cults, we've got a cargo cult of people who somehow think, if I do X, I will find my identity. Girls who've watched too many Disney princess films. People who've listened to far too much music saying you've got to do whatever you feel. People who think that individual freedom is the height of civilization. As our civilization crumbles, as we find ourselves basically in decay. People saying well, why shouldn't the old conception of the West just go to dustbin? Because you haven't got a damn thing to put in its place, that's why. These new ideals of equality, they aren't new ideals. They are totalitarian ideals. They've been tried before. And the fact that they are now under different guises with a lot of cute pictures surrounding them shouldn't, I don't want to live in a world of enforced, tyrannical, sweet, cute, big-eyed creatures any more than I want to live in a world of uniforms and guns. There are changes that are inevitable in life. So I'm kind of switching topics here a bit. I'm just thinking about what is change. Suddenly, Barack Obama's whole political campaign comes before my eyes, and then Sarah Palin's response. How's that hopey, changey stuff going for you? And it's all insane because obviously life is going to change. And there's certain things that change no matter what. So growth. When you're young, you grow, and you grow all the way until you're older. Aging is a change that's got to happen. Puberty is a change that the vast majority of people, the amount of people who don't go through anything like puberty is so small, it's not even worth discussing. Unless you use puberty blockers. Disease. A disease comes around, an illness, that's inevitable when it comes. It's just going to come. Death, the ultimate change. And then there are things which are inevitable after you've made a choice. So after you've made a choice to be married, your life is no longer what it was. Now, what's happened, and this is part of the mystery here, what's happened is we now live in a world where people no longer believe in marriage. I mean, not everyone, lots of people still believe in marriage, but the idea comes along that it's, we can just, I don't know, hook up, cohabitate, become partners. What the hell does that mean? And marriage is like, I've seen people get married after living together for about 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, 7, whatever. And then their marriage falls apart. And I'm sitting there going like, why is this? There's a lot of people have thought about these things for a while. But part of it has to do with the fact that you don't understand what marriage is to begin with. You think it's just some legal contract. It's not. There's something much more spiritual going on here. And yeah, there are legal contracts, and sometimes marriage is a business, but still, it is a relationship between people, between families. And it's very, very serious business, and you enter into it lightly at your peril. Giving birth. And here's a weird thing. We now have the choice of whether to give birth or not in a way that people in the past never did. Has that made us more responsible? Au contraire. But once you've given birth, everything changes. There are inevitable things. Even if you give your child up for adoption, you are marked by that. You cannot escape that. Raising children is a thing which brings inevitable consequences once you embark on that road. But then again, as I mentioned with my friend in the car accident, accidents are a thing which can change everything. I have another friend who was in a car accident, and, he was doing something very stupid as a child. He was in one of these kind of heightened childlike states where he thought it would be so interesting to just ride his bicycle down the road and just close his eyes and just feel it. And he also felt the rather large vehicle that slammed into him and changed his life forever. Because that's what accidents do. Accidents are a result of choice. Maybe not the choice you thought you were making. If a group of friends gets together and they're driving and drinking, and then they hit another vehicle, well, there was a choice involved. Maybe it was an accident at the time, but guess what? Someone chose to drive while drunk. So there was choice. But even like I said, life on the farm. Someone chooses to live on the farm. Now you're dealing with animals and gardening. I mean, if you think gardening isn't work, you haven't done it, evidently. But these things will change. I will never be the same person I was before I started working with animals on a farm. It's just, you just don't go back from that. Any more than a soldier ever goes back, especially once they've been in the field. They never are the same person again. That's a life-changing event. To take another life, to even fire a gun, but once you've taken a life, that's a life-changing event. You are now a different person. And that would be true, of course, in a crime as well, but for different reasons. Sexual experiences quite clearly mark one before and after. And the more and different and various ones mark one more and more and more. But then again, any kind of work changes you. Any kind of college or university experience, especially these days, parents often know, particularly parents from some more traditional grouping of people, Mormons, Christians, people who are Islamic, Muslims, even and Hindus, anyone. They send their kids to college. They send their little girl to college. She comes back with blue hair. Guess what? Your child isn't the same anymore. They've been marked. They now have a new ideology, because that's what the blue hair signifies. Washed out green hair. It signifies a change. These things are not accidental. They are not, they are a result of choices we make, which is why people are wondering, what do we do about education now, since so much of it seems to, not in every field, but in so many fields, it seems to be ideological now. And the ideology is to get rid of the Old West, the old Western values, which now just seem hopelessly steeped in hypocrisy. I would argue they're not, but that's what they are at least told by the new ideology. And, to get rid of that in favor of the new thing. But we don't know what the new thing is, except to regiment everyone to have this idea of equality, as in, I've got 2 Mac computers. They're both the 2012 generation, and they're equal to each other, because I've made them equal. To make a Procrustean bed. The Procrustean bed was, we got to fit everyone into the same bed, so we just cut the legs off of people to fit them in the bed. This is the new model of equality, of equity. Equality, if it's political equality, great. But if it's to make everyone the same, you're in a nightmare. But how is it people are accepting this? How is it? Well, it helps that they don't have any historical knowledge. I mean, how many people can tell you anything about the Soviet Union anymore? And by people, I mean not only the young people, but their teachers. I mean, not only, how many of the teachers of students in say, high school can tell you anything about what happened during the Soviet Union? Because if you knew what that was, you wouldn't be glibly rushing off to, indoctrinate your kids with the new ideology. It's that simple. Of course, there's the effect of technology. This is huge. How does this change us? So I've got a device here, and it changes me. And it does. Think of how we are changed by the smartphone. The smartphone has changed literally the world since it was introduced by Apple, in ways nobody could foresee. But as Jacques Ellul points out, what idiots we are, because we always start off talking about new technologies as these wonder things. The internet was going to bring us together and spread great ideas and stuff. The internet hasn't done any such thing. It's done just the opposite. Because as Ellul points out, everything has a dark side to it. And also every technology creates an imbalance, which then requires another technology to rectify the balance, which then creates another technology, and it's endless. So the car, the automobile. Yeah. Well, it's really nice to have entire communities shaped by the automobile, to have suburbs in California where no one even says hello anymore because they don't walk anymore, because they don't even see each other much in their front yards anymore. And of course, the video games have kept the kids away from both the front yard and the backyard, and television and all this other stuff. The screen, just the screen, has so radically changed who we are, how we get our ideas. And you're listening to this through a screen. And you should understand this. You don't know me if this is all you know. You know more than nothing, but you don't know a lot. You don't know anything in depth. Again, I was talking about at the beginning. People have lost the ability to commit in physical time and space. And without that, people keep saying to me, Byrne, you showed all these problems, in the How We Got Here series. What can we do about it? Well, I will tell you the truth. Nothing's going to change until you learn to re-inhabit physical reality and to have committed friends and committed collaborators, people who are working with you in time and space. Yeah, obviously we're going to keep using this stuff, but this is just stuff. This is just junk. The real thing happens in real time and space. The real conversations happen in real time and space. I put this up. I look at a few comments. That's not a real conversation. You know? Someone should think about visiting me here, but then again, you see, I've got that here. I've got real time and space people to talk to here about interesting ideas. That's one reason I'm here. Does it mean there's no smartphones, no computers, no video games here? Oh, no, they're here. But they haven't been taken quite to the degree that we back in my mother country of America have taken them. And I mean, even something like the electric light has completely altered humanity. Technology, it's changing everything we do. It is a separate environment. We now live, as Will says, within the host of technology. And you have to think about that, or else you have nothing to react against it. All you can do is slide with it down to, what does it move to? Well, it moves to where everything seems to be moving towards is a melding of the human and technology. That's the ultimate thing, is so that there is almost no difference between us and technology. And guess what? In that world, gender doesn't matter. In that world, all that matters is your geeky obsessions and keeping the market flowing. And in the end, it is kind of Matrix-like, where we are just the sperm cells of the machine world. Something to think about. Which brings us to the effect of propaganda. And in this technological world, all of our communication on a mass level can so easily end up as propaganda. And propaganda isn't just, like I've said, I've got plenty of videos on this, it isn't just the lies they tell versus the truth we know. Because our truth, once pumped through some, propaganda network, can easily be, whatever I say now can easily be propaganda. I mean, imagine this. Everyone you know is looking on a smartphone right now, watching me speak right now. Believe me, I would be ducking out of the conversation long before anything, that big happened. But of course, that's completely fabricated. Nothing like that ever will happen. And partly is, I managed to say things that don't, it's clear what you can do if you're really thinking about it, what you can do to get lots and lots of people watching you. The kind of clever memes you can make, the kind of clever comments you can make, the put downs you can make. The stronger your put downs, the better. If you could, if I just really went into the propaganda and just started making it, I could get so many thousands of people to watch my content. Why do I care? I care that a few people, like I said, it doesn't take a lot of people to change, what does that mean? Society. It takes a few people in time and space who are committed to working on something. Which is what the Inklings were. They didn't see themselves as committed in time and space. They didn't have to. They were just there. But it's happened in the past. Groups of people, small groups of people, met together, and things changed for good or for ill. So let me go a little bit back. Let me ask a question about individual change and personal change. So why do we change? What does our change mean? What does our personal change mean? Our individual change. What does it mean when a friend changes? When I ask how I've changed, in some ways I've changed for the good, in some ways for the bad. I am not a thin person. I am overweight. And I think about, why did that happen? Well, there's a lot of complexity to that. Part of it has to do with when I was younger, I was teased a lot. I was a little pudgy. I was teased a lot. But then I kind of grew out of that for a while. And at a certain point, I was, what was odd about that was I remember there was a time when I was riding my bicycle about 15 miles a day when I was around 20 or so. And I remember there was one guy who was living in these Jesus People communes. And I was riding back and forth to work. And there were two. One guy would tease me that I was eating too much. And the other guy was a perfectionist. And he noticed that I didn't quite work off little chubby belly part. And so he would say, Byrne, it's a shame you can't get all the way. Now, this guy went on to have his own problems in life. And the other guy had even much more. But people put those thoughts into your head. And you play with them. And I think if someone had just said, hey, that's really good, and not said you have to be perfect, I wouldn't have later seen myself slipping further and further that direction. But there was no one who gave me good enough encouragement along those lines. And then later, when I was in New York City, I think I fell into some bad eating habits. I was alone. And I've thought a lot about people being alone in the city since I've been here. And so many people have families here, much more so than all the people who come to New York to live. And, it was during that period. Well, it was also after it was after a relationship that I tried to do something with, which is too bloody and complicated to go into. But it has to do with how you see yourself in the mirror and the choices you make. So that was something, and ever since then I've been kind of like on the wrong side of weighing too much. But at some point I'm better, at some point I'm worse. That doesn't mean I don't go hiking. That doesn't mean I stop and give up. It doesn't mean I'm just like, it doesn't mean I'm asking for fat acceptance or anything like that. It just means, hey, that's just the way things turned out. And now I have to work on this a lot more. On the other hand, there are people I know who, what's one of the strange things is we look at movies and we see these extraordinarily buff guys. I remember, the effect of seeing these guys when they first started showing up in the late 80s, early 90s in movies. Because if you go back and look at the movies of, Clark Gable or Cary Grant or, Marlon Brando or everything, these guys were not these super cut, buff guys with six packs and whatever. They were essentially just normal guys, a little bit of pudge here, They weren't trying. But here's what you don't realize about all the people you see in movies now. I just saw the Daniel Craig, the last James Bond movie, which turns out to be the last Daniel Craig James Bond movie. And he is super pumped up. I mean, this guy's got serious musculature. And what do you think the guy did 5 minutes after shooting the last scene? He probably stopped working out quite so hard. Because, the guy's in his 50s. You can only do this kind of insane, like, sculpting yourself for so long. And, you should stay in shape. But the real question about life is why it matters to be in shape. It matters for other people. And not to impress them, but to be healthy, period. Not to be super beautiful. It matters to be healthy. And a bit of beauty comes with that as a gift to other people. But there are different kinds of change. So the same two different people could do the same thing, and one can do it for the wrong reason, and the other can do it for the right reason. And you can see this with bodily health. I think the most difficult thing for me has been the different times when people I shared a lot of my beliefs and thoughts with, who I really had good communications with, and you see them slowly drifting into what I call normality. And that is to say, after a while, they've got all the same views that someone reading the New York Times has got. Or they've got all the same views that someone listening to Rush Limbaugh has got. And I've had people do both of those. And it so saddens me that these people start to mirror, my friends, start to mirror what they hear in the media. And now the media, the mass media, the large media, is so toxic that, I want to know that you're getting your, if all you're getting is ideas from me, you're in trouble. You really seriously need to read books. You really seriously need to stretch your ideas. You do not need to sound like me. You need to just understand life and understand how to live it. And to ask questions. I mean, here's the real, thing. I said, there are personal changes that are, bad and terrible and tragic and horrific and permanent. It's like a tattoo. I'm not a big fan of tattoos. But, if I meet someone with a tattoo, my first thought is, my God, they should get rid of their tattoo. Because, that whole laser project is even iffier. My feeling is it's like the gargoyles on the cathedral. Okay, tattoo's going to stay. That's part of your history now. And it's the same with the events and tragedies and the sad things that are permanent in our lives. You can't change certain things. I can't change the fact that my mother tried to kill herself when I was about 7 years old. So that's a permanent part of my life. How do I deal with that? Well, it's taken me a long time to deal with the fact that what does that signal about a mother's love towards her son? It's a dark thought. But you deal with it. It's part of your history. You don't hide it. Hiding the thing is the worst thing. And in fact, here is the real crux of the issue. How can we identify the personal lies we have told ourselves to change in the worst ways possible? And when I meet people who have made the wrong choices, I met this dear poor girl who lived in the same apartment building I lived in New York City. And she, unfortunately, far more of these, alternative girls, these very cool post-punk girls in New York City, was working as a dominatrix. And somehow she had made this decision. And I remember she would always act as if there was nothing wrong with it, because this is the way you have to act. If you were to act that there was something wrong with it, you would change. But she would always act as if there was nothing wrong with it. Then one day I said, well, what do you dislike about doing that? She goes, are there difficult parts? And she goes, and then she got a really serious look on her face. And what I'm about to tell you is really dark. And she just said, I really don't like shitting on people. Yeah, she's made some permanent choices that are going to affect her. Does that mean she can't come out of it? No. I do believe in redemption. I do believe that no matter how dark it can get in life, one can turn around and go the other way. The word in the Bible for this is repentance, to turn and go back. The original Greek word is metanoia, if my memory serves correctly. It means to kind of stop, re-examine, and go back. And that is a crucial thing. Because until we enter into the process where we think about the ways in which we've lied to ourselves to get ourselves to where we are, and we all have these in multiple ways. We all tell ourselves little lies when we're children, I'm always like this, no one really understands me, this is what I deserve, these kind of little lies. These grow into huge, dark chasms within us that we feed with whatever we find to put in there as a substitute. And, so we have to ask, I have to ask, how much have I changed? Have I changed in good ways? I think yes, sometimes. I know more now. But is my knowledge a source of the wrong kind of pride? Do I think, ooh, I'm special because I know more? And the answer to that question is no, I'm not special because I know more. The knowledge is only good to the degree that I can pass it and give it to someone else. You know, have I changed in bad ways? Yeah, there have been ways in which, I wish I could go back and change certain things. Like I say, you can't. But what you can do is take what you have now and make it the best thing possible to give to someone else. And if you don't think there's anything good about it, well, you're wrong. There is, of course, still goodness left within you. As Solzhenitsyn said, the line of good and evil runs down every heart. And even in the darkest of hearts, there's still good. But even in the brightest and most loving of hearts, there are seeds of real evil. And once you realize that, then you can ask yourself about your change. And you can ask in which ways you have changed and what that change means. So this is just a bit rambly on just a few thoughts on the subject, but it's something I think about all the time. I think about it when I see people, when I talk to people, especially as time passes and you start to understand. I hope you like my visual effects today. How's that? Too dark, too bright. But, thanks for spending time with me. I could really use your help with any contributions you have to make. Hey, if you don't feel like contributing anything, there is a PayPal link below if you do feel like contributing. But feel free to like and subscribe and share this video if you think it's worthwhile. Give me your thoughts. What do you think about change? What do you think about changes in your own life? What do you think about the good stuff and the bad stuff? Don't give me your life history, but, a few thoughts. What is the meaning of those changes? Because there are good meanings and bad meanings. And the point is to get to the good meanings and to help others to make those good choices, which allow for the good change to grow. I think the bad changes inside of us are always done kind of just like looking at yourself, seeing yourself as the center of the world. Whereas the good changes start when you start looking out to others as well and say, what have I got that I can give to someone else? All right. I got things to do. Got to pay my $300 a month rent. Ooh, the pain. And, but no, seriously, if you were wondering how I'm doing with the container update, I am, my friend has said he thinks he can help me with the gift. Although it's, like I say, it's going to take some time. I'll probably lose that house I was looking at. Hey, this is life. So we'll meet each other again and stay in touch. This is Byrne in Tbilisi, Georgia, reminding you that indeed the Anadromous life means going against the stream.
A people without history is not redeemed from time. For history is a pattern of timeless moments.